Howdy, howdy, everybody. Welcome back to Cause Before Symptom. I am your esteemed guest host, Urban. Boots always beats me to it. Welcome back. Give a recommendation and suggestion for the audience to try James Carner's award-winning Elite Potion, elitepotion.com. Hit the like button on whatever respective platform you're on. We're on quite a few. If there's no like button such as Twitter or something like that, feel free to follow me or say hi if you're able to in chat. I think I have all the chats that I need here tonight if people want to say anything. Yes, Scorpion, that's rolling through my way right now, so I appreciate the heads up. It's definitely been windy today. It's the first time I've ever seen power go out twice in the same day. So it went out, and it came back on, then it went out again. It's the first time I've ever seen that happen. So if the show just goes out intermittently in the middle of whatever, you know why. So let's see. Hopefully we'll get through the show tonight. What we're going to do is I'm going to talk about the city of London, because it is at the center of the British Empire, which in turn, created the United States, born from the British Empire. We're going to touch briefly on the agreement that I mentioned a couple of days ago, probably a few times, between King John and the Pope, where he basically signed England over to the Pope. And we're going to talk about what the city of London is about, and we're going to also check out some of the weird little antique processes that they have. For instance, they have a special position in the Parliament. They have a representative. His official title, is he's called the Remembrancer, and his job is to basically speak for the city of London in the Parliament, but other than that, they don't really have any official capacity. But they have all these ancient guilds and rituals, and so it's interesting to check out, and I'll show you some photos and stuff. So we'll get that going after the intro, guys. Stick around, and we'll be back with you in a moment. Let some people join in. So hold tight, guys. Alrighty, guys, welcome back. Yeah, there's a whole lot to talk about with the City of London. Whole lot. So, the City of London is to be completely you have to distinguish it from London. It is not London. It is within London, but it is much older than London. It has been there since Roman times. It was a type of Roman fortress. It was kind of a trading post. It was a Roman creation, and because of that, it's why it has its standing, because it was created by the Roman Empire, and so it has that blessing and that standing. And there's been, you don't ever really hear it mentioned in any type of media. A lot of people would never even know the distinction. So this right here that you're seeing is just a compilation of images. Some of these we'll look at in detail. There's a place in the City of London called Paternoster Square with a sun obelisk style symbol. which is interesting because there's something called the Sator square, which is a matrix of numbers that can be arranged, if you see in the bottom right corner there, that can be arranged to spell out Pater Noster both ways, across and vertically, and Alpha Omega, Alpha Omega. How's it going, Nolone 888? Welcome to the show. Glad to have you tonight. We're talking about the city of London tonight. And so the city of London has a lot of interesting architecture. It's very old. It does have some very interesting architecture. It does have an obelisk, of course. And what's interesting is the temple bar, which is, you know, the bar that you have to be in the bar if you're going to be a lawyer. Well, the temple bar is associated with the Knights Templars. And as a matter of fact, if you go into the Webster's 1828 dictionary, you will find the term Templar actually says as much. So here, let me bring that over and I can show people that. Right here. Webster's 1828 Templar says, from the temple, a house near the Thames, which originally belonged to the Knights Templars. The latter took their denomination from an apartment of the palace of Baldwin II in Jerusalem near the temple. The first definition, a student of law. Templars, Knights of the Temple, a religious military order first established at Jerusalem in favor of pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. The order originated with some persons who, in 1118, devoted themselves to the service of God, promising to live in perpetual chastity, obedience, and poverty, after the manner of canons. In 1228, the order was confirmed in the Council of Troyes and subjected to a rule of discipline. It flourished, became immensely rich, and its members became so insolent and vicious that the order was suppressed by the Council of Vienna in 1312. So yeah, in 1828 in the dictionary, this was common knowledge. So this building, when I first saw the image when I was putting this together, it reminded me of the papal tiara, or, you know, the pine cone. Kind of looks like a pine cone almost. It's pretty unique. I've not seen anything like that elsewhere. So let's see, images, the temple bar. So this is the temple bar. And if you get a pretty good glimpse at that, we go over to the Jesuit headquarters in Rome. It's called the Church of the Jesu, and it matches very closely. You got the two statues, the two individuals. I'm not sure who they depict. I didn't get that far yet. Then you have the temple bar. You have a similar style crest in the middle. That has a window, but the other one it does have a window, but it's up higher. So these are very similar designs. This one is in Rome. There's a Freemason, a Scottish Rite Freemason headquarters, literally in the same plaza as the Church of the Jesu in Rome. Literally right across the street. You go out that door right there. On the other side, there's a Freemason Scottish Rite headquarters. So, the temple bar. It's a kind of a gate. So, what I'm going to do is I've got probably about 8 minutes total of some videos that explain the process of how their election works and just kind of some of the technicalities. It'll set the stage, and then I will get into some of the reading and some of the nitty-gritty stuff. So let's go ahead and do that. These videos are pretty old, actually. I watched these when I was like 14 when I probably watched these videos for the first time, and they helped me immensely, you know, when I was young to understand what this was, but it's definitely a loaded history. So let's go ahead and get that
Financial capital of the world, and the great city of London, known for its historical landmarks, modern skyscrapers, ancient markets, and famous bridges. It's arguably the financial capital of the world and home to over 11,000 people. Wait.
Nice, sounds good. Glad to have you, buddy.
Different place from London. though London is also known for its historical landmarks, modern skyscrapers, ancient markets, famous bridges, and is home to the government royal family and 7 million people. But if you look at a map of London crafted by a careful cartographer, that map will have a 1 square mile hole near the middle. It's here where the City of London lives inside the city named London. Despite these confusingly close names, the two Londons have separate city halls and elect separate mayors who collect separate taxes to fund separate police who enforce separate laws. The mayor of the City of London has a fancy title, the Right Honourable the Lord Mayor of London, to match his fancy outfit. He also gets to ride in a golden carriage and work in a guild hall, while the Mayor of London has to wear a suit, ride a bike, and work in an office building. The City of London also has its own flag and its own crest, which is awesome and makes London's lack of either twice as sad.
So, to note, the episode that I did, I think it was 2 nights ago, on Peter Faber, the Jesuit priest who is the founder that nobody talks about, he was from Savoy. So Savoy has the red and white, and they're inverted. So the City of London is the red cross on the white, and then Savoy is the other way around.
To top it off, the City of London gets to act more like one of the countries in the UK than just an oddly located city, for, uniquely, the corporation that runs the City of London is older than the United Kingdom by several hundred years. So how did the UK end up with 2 Londons, one inside of the other? Because Romans. 2,000 years ago, they came to Great Britain, killed a bunch of druids, and founded a trading post on the River Thames and named it Londinium. Being Romans, they got to work doing what Romans do, enforcing laws, increasing trade, building temples, public baths, roads, bridges, and a wall to defend their work. And it's this wall which is why the current City of London exists. For though the Romans came and the Romans went, and kingdoms rose and kingdoms fell, the wall endured, protecting the city within. And the city, governing itself and trading with the world, grew rich. 1,000 years after the Romans, yet still 1,000 years ago, when William the Conqueror came to Great Britain to conquer everything and begin modern British history, he found the City of London with its sturdy walls more challenging to defeat than farmers on open fields. So he agreed to recognize the rights and privileges City of Londoners were used to in return for them recognizing him as the new king. Though after the negotiation, William quickly built towers around the City of London, which were just as much about protecting William from the locals within as defending against the Vikings from without. This started a 1,000-year-long tradition whereby monarchs always reconfirmed that yes, the City of London is a special, unique place that's best left to its own business, while simultaneously distrusting it. Many a monarch thought the City of London was too powerful and rich, and one even built a new capital city nearby, named Westminster, to compete with the City of London and hopefully suck power and wealth away from it. This was the start of the Second London. As the centuries passed, Westminster grew and merged with nearby towns, eventually surrounding the walled-in and still separate City of London. But people began to call the whole urban collection London, and the name became official when Parliament joined the towns together under a single municipal government with a mayor. But the mayor of London still doesn't have power over the tiny City of London, which has rules and traditions like nowhere else in the country and possibly the world. For example, the ruling monarch doesn't just enter the City of London on a whim, but instead asks for permission from the Lord Mayor at a ceremony. While it's not required by law, the ceremony is unusual to say the least. The City of London also has a representative in Parliament, the Remembrancer, whose job it is to protect the city's special rights. Because of this, laws passed by Parliament sometimes don't apply to the City of London, most notably voting reform laws, which we'll discuss next time. But if you're curious for a preview, unlike anywhere else in the UK, elections in the City of London involve medieval guilds and modern companies. Finally, the City of London also owns and operates land and buildings far outside its border, making it quite wealthy. Once you start looking for the city's crest, you'll find it in lots of unexpected places, most notably on Tower Bridge, which, while being in London, is operated by the City of London. These crests everywhere, when combined with the City of London's age and wealth and quasi-independent status, make it an irresistible temptation for conspiracy nuts. Add in the oldest Masonic temple, and it's not long before the crazy part of the internet starts yelling about secret societies controlling the world via the finance industry from inside the city-state of London. And don't forget the reptilian alien queen.
Here we are. That's what we're doing tonight, guys. Congratulations. You're part of the video's kind of finale here.
Who's really behind it all. But conspiracy theories aside, the City of London is not an independent nation like the Vatican is, no matter how much you might read it on the internet. Rather, it's a unique place in the United Kingdom with a long and very complicated history. The wall that began all this 2,000 years ago is now mostly gone, so the border between London and its secret inner city isn't so obvious. Though, next time you're in London, if you come across a small dragon on the street, he still guards the entrance to the city, in a country in a country. The City of London is a unique place. It's the city, in a country in a country, that runs its government with perhaps the most complicated elections in the world, involving medieval guilds, modern corporations, mandatory titles, and fancy hats, all of which are connected in this horrifying org chart. Why so complicated? Though the new skyscrapers might make you think the City of London is relatively young, it's actually the oldest continuous government on the island of Great Britain. The City of London predates the empire that Victoria ruled, the kingdoms Anne united, and the Magna Carta that John reluctantly signed. While the London which surrounds the city only got to electing its first mayor in 2000, the list of mayors who've governed the City of London is almost 700 people long, going back more than 1,000 years. The City of London's government is so old that there's no surviving record of exactly when it was born. There are only documents like the Magna Carta which mention the pre-existing powers the City of London already had at that point in time. So while a government like the United States officially gets its power from the people and Parliament gets its power from the Crown, which in turn gets it from God, the City of London gets its power from time immemorial, meaning that the city is so old it just is. And that age brings with it unusual and complicated traditions. The most notable of these, perhaps, is that in City of London elections, companies get votes. Quite a lot, actually. About 3/4 of the votes cast in city elections are from companies, with the remaining 1/4 from residents. The way it works is that the bigger a company is, the more votes it gets from the City of London. The companies then give their votes to select employees who work but do not live within the city, and it's these employees who do the actual voting at election time. The result is that the Common Council.
So just to make clear kind of on that point, these are people basically not voting based on any resident. Like, this isn't because they live there. This is because they work in this city. And so basically this is a very strange arrangement that, as he says, doesn't have any sovereignty. There's no conspiracy to see here, but it gets its power because it's just been here forever. I have a hard time reconciling those two things. But I did an interview a couple weeks back with Michelle Gibson. I've done two. She's got a lot of great videos on YouTube. Really couldn't recommend a channel more than hers. But we got onto the topic of the company. We all know about the company. And we also got onto the topic of the guilds and these, for instance, the Drapers Guild. And, you know, these companies, these livery companies, they're called livery companies. And that's a very interesting word, livery. There's a lot to get into here. I highly suggest people check those out. Maybe in one of the next couple of days, we can watch some clips or something from that. But yeah, there's a lot of strangeness. These companies have played significant roles in the East India Company, both of them, the Dutch and the British, the opium trade. We know about the Jesuit opium trade. So
Council, the bureaucratic beating heart of the City of London, has about 20 common councillors elected by residents of the city and about 80 elected by companies of the city. The reasoning behind this unusual tradition is that for every one person who lives in the City of London, 43 people commute in every day. In total, that's 300,000 commuters using city services and whose employment depends on the City of London being business friendly. The man in charge of the Common Council and who heads the city's government is the Right Honourable the Lord Mayor of London. Now, suppose you want to be Lord Mayor. Surely, just as in that other London, all you'll need do is A, be a British Commonwealth or EU citizen who has B, lived in the city for a year, and who C, wins the election, right? No. In the City of London, that's not nearly enough. Ready for the qualifications list? Before you can even run for Lord Mayor, you need to have been a sheriff of the City of London. But before you can be sheriff, you need to be an alderman. What's an alderman? Well, the City of London is divided into 25 wards, and each ward elects one alderman to represent it on the Court of Aldermen, a subsection of the Common Council. But before you can run for alderman, you need to gain freeman status. And who gives out freeman status? Why, none other than the very Court of Aldermen you're trying to get elected.
Freeman status. So that's interesting. Maybe the Masonic Lodge gives out the Freeman status, or maybe I'm thinking into that too much.
elected too, which might just seem like a conflict of interest. Luckily, there is another way to get freeman status. Join one of the city's guilds. Sadly, they aren't called guilds, they're called livery companies, a name which is both more boring and less descriptive, but the remnants of medieval guilds, many of them are, and within the city there are 180.
If you look at the coats of arms, they're kind of interesting, especially the one, I think that's the drapers right there on the right, there's the mermaids, the maidens, and they call it the mystery. It's in their motto, the mystery of the drapers.
Of them to choose from, including, but not limited to, the apothecaries, the fishmongers, the masons, the mercers, the scientific instrument makers, the bankers, the shipwrights, the wheelwrights, the butchers, the bakers, 2 different candlestick makers, and the most exciting of all, the chartered accountants. Many of these guilds, like the Fletchers, have become charities, but some are still active, such as the goldsmiths who test the quality of British coinage, and the hackney carriage drivers who license taxi drivers. To join one of these guilds, you'll either need to meet the professional requirements, or for the charities like the haberdashers, you'll need the approval of 2 existing members. If you meet none of the livery company's membership requirements, but you think you'll be a clever clogs and start your own livery company and grant yourself freeman status, tough luck, because new livery companies need to be approved by, you guessed it, the Court of Aldermen. But let's assume one way or another you get the official freeman status certificate. Now you can finally run for Alderman of a ward, after the Lord Chancellor's Advisory Committee also approves of you. But that small barrier passed, you can win election as Alderman in either one of the 4 wards where people live or the 21 wards where companies live. Once on the Court of Aldermen, to continue your path to the Mayor's office in Guildhall, you must now be elected as Sheriff. But this time it's the members of the livery companies who pick the sheriffs. So if the livery company members elect you as Sheriff after you have successfully completed your term, then you can finally run for Mayor. But surprisingly, residents of the City of London don't vote for the Mayor. Our old friends on the Court of Aldermen do. So in summary, once you get your freeman status from either the Court of Aldermen or the livery companies, and after your ward elects you as Alderman, and then the livery companies elect you as Sheriff, and after your term as Sheriff ends, but while you're still on the Court of Aldermen, then you can run for Mayor. And assuming the other aldermen select you, you can finally take your place as the Right Honourable the Lord Mayor of London, for 1 year with no salary. And you have to cover your own expenses, which will be quite considerable, as your new job consists mostly of making hundreds of speeches a year around the world promoting city business. But you do get that fancy hat, which just might make it all worthwhile.
Yeah, so as I was kind of sitting here thinking while we were watching it, my guess is that it really looks like they had attempted to systematize, put a system together that was like an oligarchy. It was like a formal oligarchy, and it was just a bunch of almost, it seems like Masonic lodges put together. So if it's like a governing system for Freemasonry, but like a one based on money. Very interesting. And the business there that goes on there is very technical, almost in a spellbinding kind of way. They don't necessarily do work that is direct. They would be doing specific regulations. They would be writing the codes and the statutes and the policies and stuff like that. It's very deep. So the mystery of the drapers, whatever that is, it's definitely a mystery. Okay, let's shrink this and go back to the other viewer. We will start here. We'll go into the background between the Magna Carta in 1213, because there's a lot to be said on that. The legal and financial power concentrated in the City of London today is not an accident of modern capitalism. It is the direct result of a legally binding contract forged in the Middle Ages between the English monarchy, the Knights Templar, and the Papal Caesar in Rome. 1213, the Charta, Magna Charta, the Great Charter is what it means, Grand Charter. England as a papal fiefdom. To understand the power of the City of London, one must examine the monumental betrayal of 1213. King John of England, facing domestic rebellion and the threat of a French invasion, orchestrated by Pope Innocent III, capitulated entirely to the Vatican. On May 15th, 1213, John formally resigned his crown and the kingdoms of England and Ireland into the hands of the Pope's legate, who is called Pandulf. The transaction took place in the house of the Knights Templar, the one mentioned in the dictionary, near Dover, in a legally binding charter bearing his golden seal. King John offered and freely yielded the whole kingdom of England and Ireland to the Holy Roman Church, receiving them back only as a feudatory vassal, a colony. Yeah, I kind of was, in that context, I think the word in that, like, since the city is sold, probably would have originated with that. But yeah, there's probably different meanings to it, because the way that they have it set up there is, I'll have to take a screenshot of that chart that he made, because that was interesting. It's so confusing, and they have so many different technicalities. He said you need to be a Mason to get a union contract, but it would help. Yeah, and then there was that whole thing a couple months ago with they didn't want to disclose that they were Masons because the corruption there is so bad. It's very bad there. Let's see. So yes, King John basically was, he relinquished the crown of England to the Pope, and he was made to basically be a colony at this point to the Pope. He did this freely too. We have the letters, we have the communication between the two of them. You can read their writing to each other back and forth. And he offers this to the Pope because the Pope is basically pissed off at him. And so he says, I'll do this so that you are fine with me and you're not mad at me anymore. King John offered and freely yielded the whole kingdom of England and Ireland to the Holy Roman Church, receiving them back only as a feudatory vassal. As consideration, which is an important word. Let's pause and go to consideration since I have the definition for it ready. Consideration is a kind of a banking or a contractual term, I guess you could say. The inducement to a contract. The cause, motive, price, or impelling influence which induces a contracting party to enter into a contract. The reason or material cause of a contract. Some right, interest, profit, or benefit accruing to one party, or some forbearance, detriment, loss, or responsibility given, suffered, or undertaken by another. So it's saying he received the whole of England back from the Pope as he was a vassal, and it was consideration for the contract that John agreed to pay an annual tribute of 1,000 marks sterling to the Catholic Church, the Roman Church, 700 for England, 300 for Ireland. Pope Innocent III formally accepted this offer, establishing the Pope as the absolute sovereign for legal owner of the British Isles. Magna Carta illusion. The establishment of England as a papal property had immediate devastating legal consequences that are suppressed in mainstream history. When the English barons, who were, they had a lot of, this is supposedly why it was signed, because they wanted freedom and democracy or something in England, so they made him sign it, and that's not true. So the barons were pissed because they were dealing with what was going on with the Pope. So that's been suppressed. When the English barons forced King John to sign the Magna Carta in 1215 at Runnymede, they believed that they were securing permanent human rights and limiting monarchical power. However, Pope Innocent III swiftly intervened, declaring the Magna Carta completely null and void. The Pope's legal argument was airtight under the 1213 contract. Because the lordship of the kingdom belonged to the Roman Church, King John had no legal authority to make any changes to the kingdom's laws without the special mandate of the Pope. Pope Innocent III condemned the Magna Carta as an illegal extortion that impaired his royal rights. He threatened excommunication against anybody who observed it. Thus, the foundational document of Western liberty was stillborn, legally erased by absolute property rights of the Vatican. Consideration and loss of trust and a broken bond strikes me as interesting, but not directly related to London. Yeah, it's interesting to, it's hard to articulate what I'm kind of saying, but when you look up the definition and you read it a couple times, sometimes I'll read it once or twice, it really, you start to have a lot of, I guess if you're seeing it like a stage, it's like you're seeing the stage from like being behind it and you're seeing it, everything, in layers. It's hard to articulate. It helps a lot. I think that's why I'm so keen on it. Yeah, so this was an agreement that they had both agreed to. So this is a valid contract, and nobody's ever brought up that this has been resolved. It's a buried part of history, and so I imagine that this is why, if we go back up, why you have these that look the same, and why you have the 1828 dictionary that says that this had to do with the Knights Templar's house, and that was where this was signed. So this is a whole deep thing. They don't want people knowing about this because it really makes people understand that the church has more power than is let on, because you start to see very quickly the Catholic Church is able to clean up information very well. I have to dig deeper to find that information, and it's usually removed and hidden very well. Also, the church relies on manipulating puppets to do the work. Basically, they will get somebody else, perhaps, if you're dealing in a different part of the world, they will get somebody of that race, of that culture, who is trusted to act as an intermediary, a puppet, and they will have them go and do the work for them, because then when eventually the scheme is found out, that asset can be disposed of. And this is why you go back to Kennedy assassination, you go back to all of these assassinations, the Trump Butler shooting thing that happened. You have a patsy who gets killed before they can answer any questions. That's exactly the same method. And you go to the documentary, everything is a rich man's trick, and that's an Italian trick directly from the mafia. That's as old as the Sicilian Hills. As old as the Sicilian Hills means the Roman Empire. That's what Cosa Nostra means. It means our thing, or this thing of ours, but that was originally the Roman scheme. What we've got going in Rome. Let's see, the Knights Templar, the architects of the city of London. The mechanics of this Vatican control were administered through the Pope's personal military and financial agents, the Knights Templar, by the famous bull Omne Datum Optimum in 1162. The Templars were made immune from all lay or ecclesiastical jurisdiction, answering only to the Supreme Pontiff, the Pope, in Rome. As laymen invested with ecclesiastical sanctity, they became the financial agents of the Crusaders and the primary bankers of kings and princes. They established their English headquarters, the New Temple, in London, which quickly became the center for conferences on great affairs of church and state. The Templars carried on a regular business of foreign exchange, forex they call it now, forex, foreign exchange, and were utilized by the crown as royal agents in the collection of taxes and subsidies. So it's important to understand when the term crown is used, and we'll get there eventually. We've got plenty of word terms and stuff to look at later. The crown is a company. It's not just necessarily the monarch. It does mean the monarch, but let me give you a quick little example of this. So the monarch has a golden stagecoach, very nice work of art. But if you see that these are mermaids, or mermen, I guess, but they and you remember the drapers, the Drapers Guild, and they have the mermaids on the coat of arms. And so these are holding a fasci. We talked about it, the bundles of faggots fascinated together. But it has a trident instead of an axe head. And I've never seen this symbol anywhere else. Very unique to this and only this. So my guess is the crown is this symbol, which means the emperor, but not of the legions of Rome, but of the sea. Now the sea, the current sea, or the sea of people, however you want to look at it, was considered to be the realm. It used to, like, to the ancient people, the sea was hell. Before the modern understanding of brimstone and red and fire, to the ancient people, ancient people, they understood it as the sea, because it's cold and you don't know how deep it is and you don't know what's in the sea. It was, downward. So it was the realm of the dead, the sea. And so the symbol is kind of saying he is the emperor of hell. He is Satan, basically. He's the king of hell. And I imagine that's what the crown really is, with the city of London and the corporate backing, because you can't be a king without any control over the currency. And the secret in the British setting is that the monarch of England has not much control over finance in a government policy way, meaning the king doesn't have any technical ability to control the finance of the government anymore. The only power he has is if he can do it through subtle finance manipulation, through these guilds, these companies. That's how it's done. And that is a big, not the entirety of it, but people forget a lot. Like, it seems like people just haven't done their research, or they don't know what they're talking about. But you talk about anything other than Israel and they get really mad because that's what they're angry about. And sure, it angers me too. But who created Israel in the 40s? It was the Balfour Declaration to a British banker. Interesting. Okay. So it is a business. That's what's going on over there in the Middle East. This whole operation is being run with the blessing of the City of London. No questions about it. Because they can do all the dirty work over there in the Middle East, and nobody will ever tie it back to this city inside of London and all these bankers. They're never going to find out about the people in Rome, right across the street from the Jesuit headquarters, the Scottish Rite Freemasonry. They're never going to find out about that. They're just going to think it's those people over there in the Middle East, and it's working pretty well. If I have to say it, it seems like it's working pretty well. People seem to think now, it's like, I guess people of different cultural backgrounds, that only one culture is able to participate in evil, and that's just not, it doesn't matter where you're from or who you are, you could be evil either way. It's people who claim to be good. I'm a good person. I'm a good, pious person. But they're not really good. They're liars. That's what it means. To say you're a good Christian, but then you're not a good Christian. You really are just using it to stand on. So it's almost unforgivable sin, because you don't even get to the point where people don't even want to, they think that they are being real. They think that that is real. And so they've quite literally ruled out the possibility that maybe that's not what it's about. They don't want to be wrong. And so it's not that they can't be forgiven. It's that they've ruled out asking for it. Why they say, Trump says, why would I ask for forgiveness if I've done nothing wrong? Well, if you don't think you've done anything wrong, you're just screwed, because if you need to ask for forgiveness, That's the only thing you need to do. You have one objective, nothing else. You just have to ask for forgiveness. But if you don't think you've done anything wrong, well, why would you do that? I've done nothing wrong. And so it's not like a hate, like you're to be punished because I hate you. It's like you're just going to get to a point where yes, exactly, absolutely, that's it. Sophism, relativism. And I think we talked about that the other night. Moral relativism. That's popped up in a couple different episodes. See, these all have a kind of a common thread. Let's see. When the Templar order was officially disbanded by the Pope in 1312 on Friday the 13th, their vast London properties were eventually transformed into the epicenter of the British legal system. The Templar estates were divided into the inner, middle, and outer temple. Today, the inner temple, the middle temple, and Lincoln's Inn, along with Gray's Inn, constitute the 4 inns of court. These inns are the absolute gatekeepers of the legal profession. They are the only power in England that can admit an individual to the bar in England. Therefore, the entire legal apparatus of the British Empire, and by extension, the American Bar Association, was birthed from and remains spiritually tied to the Templar network established to serve the Pope. And the reason why is simple. Why is the American bar tied to the British bar? Because the term bar is a trademark term. You can't call yourself the American bar and not get permission from the people who created the term bar, because all of these, for instance, let's bring this up again, so that everybody can see it again. The term coronavirus, that was trademark term too. They trademarked that. The company registration for the United States, but then you have right here on the left the patent from 2018 for coronavirus. So these are trademark terms. I think you know what, I'm pretty sure that there have been other people that have that exact issue. You might, if you just have to, you just restart the app and come back into the stream and it should be good. Rumble is a bit of a buggy app. It does have like a kind of its pros and cons. Like, for instance, it's not as hard on the stupid restrictions as YouTube, but the app is a little bit buggy and whatnot. So yeah, you can just try to restart. Yeah, so these are patent terms. Over here you've got, we're not even going to get to really go into this in depth, but they have the Company's House in the City of London, which would register the overseas entity, the United States. So this is all taking place in that small area. And let's go back to the other view. These are trademark terms, so you can't use the term American Bar Association without getting the blessing of the original Bar Association. The City of London, the next section, the Sovereign Square Mile. King John's submission in the Templar infrastructure laid the groundwork for the modern City of London. The City of London is an autonomous, privately owned square mile that is entirely separate from the County of London. It possesses its own private police force and is governed by a Lord Mayor functioning outside the jurisdiction of the British Parliament. The archives reveal that the term "the Crown" does not refer to the British monarch, but to the secret oligarch families and the Bank of England that ruled the sovereign financial state. The Bank of England was chartered in 1694 by William of Orange, who had been financed by Amsterdam bankers to overthrow the Catholic King James II. This consolidated the national debt and handed the power of creating money to a private banking monopoly. Jesuits and Rothschilds. The final synthesis of Rome and London occurred when the Jesuit order infiltrated and usurped the highest echelons of the financial power structure following their temporary suppression by Pope Clement and the 14th in 1773. Jesuits allied with the House of Rothschild. According to the Encyclopedia Judaica, the Rothschilds bear the title guardians of the Vatican treasury. And a lot of people don't seem to know that, or they don't remember it, or they don't want people to talk about that. All right, buddy, I appreciate you stopping in for a while tonight. Have a good night. Be safe, buddy. So, yeah, in the Encyclopedia Judaica, the Rothschilds, this was around the 1900 edition or something like that, they bear the title Guardians of the Vatican Treasury. By the year 1800, during the reign of King George III, the Jesuit order had gained complete control over the British Crown and the Bank of England. England, though ostensibly Protestant, was utilized by the Black Pope, the Jesuit general, to conduct the Opium Wars against China, punish the rival Roman Catholic monarchs via the Napoleonic Wars, and fund global intelligence operations. The City of London's immense wealth, managed by Masonic and banking elites, became the financial engine for the Vatican's ultimate goal, the restoration of the Pope's temporal power over all nations. The conclusion, King John's 1213 agreement, was the legal mechanism that surrendered the British Isles to the Roman Pontiff. The Knights Templar, acting as the Pope's autonomous bankers, embedded this power into the soil of London, creating a sovereign, legal, and financial fortress, the Inns of Court, and the City of London. Today, the city operates as the financial branch of the Vatican's global matrix, utilizing fiat currency and maritime law to maintain the Earth's populations as debt slaves to the Holy Roman Empire. Let's go ahead and get the definition for maritime law. Very simple definition. The actual prevailing system of law used today, a military concept, where the captain is the master of the ship, and you don't rock the boat, and we follow orders or people die. That's how maritime law works. Because if you're on a boat going through the ocean and you start to rock the boat and cause trouble, they will throw you overboard. So that's how it works. And that's why all the people in Washington, D.C. are covering up for Epstein. It's because if they don't follow orders, somebody they care about is going to get hurt. So to recap on the three city-states, total domination comes in by a divided by three structure of hierarchy. There are three specialized sovereign nodes that obey their own laws and pay no taxes. The Vatican City is one, the spiritual and political command center, functioning as an autonomous religious cult. It is a front for the P2 Masonic Lodge and the Illuminati, managing global organized crime, intelligence, and immense hidden wealth. Washington, D.C., we talked about the wording, the Constitution for the United States versus of, to constitute something. The Washington, D.C. is the military enforcement arm. It is an independent corporate entity with a military mandate to stir up and foment continual global conflicts, generating immense profits for the international corporations and central bankers. The City of London, the financial epicenter, this is the central brain of the material matrix, controlling the world's wealth, stock markets, and the hidden piggy banks. The City of London, to recap, the Crown and the Bank, the true ruler of the square mile is the Crown, which does not refer to the British monarch, but to the secret oligarchical families and the Howdy, everybody. Welcome back to Cause Before Symptom. I am your esteemed guest host, Urban, back with you again after our brief cut short last night, even though it seemed like we kind of knew it was going to happen. So, yeah, we lost power and then came back on around noon today. So, thankfully, that was about all that happened. But it was the third time in one day. Thank you. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks, Boots. I appreciate you helping us out with that. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the follow button. The city of London parades a giant statue of Gog and Magog every year to declare that Britain and the Bank of England must control the world. They've claimed world government as their birthright for centuries. That is kind of their thing, is to rule the government. I guess let me rephrase it, to rule the empire through currency. And I've actually found an interesting connection on that too, because I showed you the this golden stagecoach with the mermaids and the unique fascia design.
And Gog and Magog, one of the most familiar sights at any Lord Mayor show for many, many years. Traditional guardians of the City of London. They've been carried at the Lord Mayor's show since 1554. Gog and Magog, one of the most familiar sights.
So if that doesn't show you there's something going on there, I don't know what will, guys. See, John Dee, who was Queen Elizabeth I's court magician, conjured the very idea of a British Empire. He practiced black magic, spoke with angels, and prophesied England's global dominion. 2 centuries later, the British Foreign Office created Christian Zionism as a covert operation. John Nelson Darby supplied the theology. Lord Shaftesbury sold it to the aristocracy. Together, they made sure the will of God had finally been brought into conformity with the English foreign policy. The same elite funded Darby. Centuries later, Mark Carney, who now runs Canada, formerly ran the Bank of England. They created Israel to control the Middle East, and today millions of American Christians pray for a war that they've been told is God's will, never knowing it was manufactured in London to serve the empire. Looking for answers in Ezekiel. It's because the global financial elites need your consent for the war against Iran, Russia, and ultimately China. It says a chart of history running from the deluge to the millennium. A nation, a company of nations. You see, that's interesting right there here. Probably need to, let me make this bigger for everybody. So it's interesting that it says company of nations. That is a very interesting, phrasing, a nation and a company of nations. So, Anglo-Saxondom, God with us, the possession of Irish Palestine. That's what it says, the gist of the English question. And so, a place of burial for Gog and all his multitudes is what it says. It's very fine, and the photo's not perfectly clear, but a company could be Jesuit, or it could also point to the companies of the City of London. And yeah, it's very interesting. Let me see if there's anything else in this post. Yes, this is interesting. I've got a connection between Lord Palmerston and Giuseppe Mazzini, who was, as you probably know already, the one who engaged with Albert Pike and had the letter for World War III. So this is connected to everything going on right now. And you're right, it's right out in the open, Art Gertison. Right out in the open. In 1850, Lord Palmerston is engaged in a campaign to make London the undisputed center of a new worldwide Roman Empire. He is attempting to conquer the world in the way that the British have already conquered India, reducing every other nation to the role of a puppet, client, and fall guy for British imperial policy. Lord Palmerston's campaign is not a secret. He has declared it here in the Houses of Parliament, saying that whatever in the world a British subject goes, he can flaunt the laws, secure that the British fleet will support him. Civis Romanus sum. Every Briton is a citizen of this new Rome, thundered Lord Palmerston. With that, the universal empire was proclaimed.
History, it says, B'nai B'rith's relationship to the Civil War presents something of a mystery. They say that the arrest of the B'nai B'rith's leader in Washington as a Confederate spymaster was unfair. They say that no one can account for why the group was not pro-Union, when most Jews were pro-Union, and B'nai B'rith's lodges were almost all in the north. Indeed,
I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say because the Vatican supported the Confederacy, and I did a video on that. So this video right here is something that we'll have to play more in detail later, but I'm going to retweet it, so anybody who's interested in this video here can find it on my Twitter, or X, whatever it's called now. Because Chaikin, Anton Chaikin, who's the guy speaking here, he's in a video that I posted a couple of days ago, actually. So, it's a big scheme. All of these people are in cahoots with each other. And what people have failed to understand is that you don't have to just be one race to participate in evil. You don't have to be in this group and that's the only people who are bad. People, they are so carried away with this. So here, let me just go ahead and play this little clip and we'll get this out of the way. It's the clip on Jesuits and Zionists, and then we can come full circle.
This is Johnny Cerrucci with another Mig-Mag special report. A pilgrimage has a very special significance in the Roman Catholic religion. However, Protestants would contend that it has no place in a Christian faith and is far more pagan than it is Christian. The destruction of Herod's temple in 70 AD signified the passing of physical locations of significance for born-again Christians. Christians' own bodies now become living temples, and Christians believe that they do not need to travel to a place of significance in order to commune with God. The sacrifice of Jesus Christ makes it possible to do so at any place or time. But this practice de-emphasizes the role of self, and the belief that one can earn their own salvation has long been held by the Roman Catholic faith. Consequently, Jerusalem has long been coveted by the Vatican. In my book, Secret History, The Erased Clues That Prove Who Rules the World from Behind the Curtain, I share a fascinating account given by ex-Jesuit priest Alberto Rivera on Rome's manipulation of Islam in order to own Jerusalem. Rivera states that he was briefed directly by Cardinal Augustin Bey, the Jesuit provincial superior in Germany, and the personal confessor to Eugenio Pacelli, Pope Pius XII, whom we've already told you was foundational in creating and guiding the Nazi Third Reich. Rivera says that Bey explained how Muhammad was tutored by his uncle, who was a Roman Catholic monk, who indoctrinated him to hate the Jews and to retake Jerusalem. Vatican officials thought it was particularly useful, not having a standing army of their own, to exploit Muslims in the Middle East, to kill and be killed on behalf of their agenda. Between his Catholic wife, Khadija, and his Catholic mentor uncle, Waraqwa, it was easy to manipulate Muhammad. The Vatican did its best to enable Muslim armies to kill Jews and Christians in their mission to retake Jerusalem. But after they were successful, they shocked their masters by refusing to hand Jerusalem over to Rome. This was the real reason the Crusades were initiated. But Islam's rebellion was eventually put to good use. Rome would instead exploit the hatred that it had fomented between Muslims and Jews, and resurrect.
It's important just to get it out of the way. This whole idea that Trump has, they are telling supposedly what I'm gathering is that the command, like the people in charge of the military, who have been brought into these cults because they're in command posts and they have to be comfortable with, murdering people. So whatever you get with that is going to be pretty, interesting, like Michael Aquino and those types of people. But they seem to believe that Trump is, quote unquote, anointed to begin Armageddon. I'm not so sure that, the regular average members of the military are on board with that all the way. But it's no different than Deus Vult and God wills it, because it's just saying, hey, it doesn't matter, God will forgive you. You can just go ahead and do whatever you want to do, and it's for a good cause. It's the same thing, just adapted to modern sentiments with a slightly different narrative, but it's taking place at the same place. So
the ancient nation state known as Israel for two reasons. First, to be a place of never-ending war and conflict, and second, certainly most importantly, to wipe away the well-known understanding that Rome was the mystery Babylon mentioned in the book of Revelation, and the papacy was the office of the Antichrist. At the time of Martin Luther's Reformation in 1517, these were considered facts by sincere Christians. It is a testament to the success of the Roman and Freemasonic agenda in resurrecting Israel that now such understandings are unheard of. Today, Christians unknowingly believe Jesuit doctrines about the end times that will supposedly revolve around.
And the one thing to look out for when you're interested in knowing how they do this, you go back to the French Revolution, John Robison's Proofs of a Conspiracy is a very well-known book, but then there's another one that talks about the Jacobins and talks about how they had they used the same mottos as the Jesuits in their degrees of Freemasonry. But what you will find is that encyclopedias, dictionaries, Bibles, study Bibles, they will all have been edited by, sometimes a professor, Jesuit professor or something like that. You look for the SJ at the end of their name in the, the back, or like wherever they bury the credits, but they edit the books, the encyclopedias. That's how they kind of subtly steer things without ever being in the limelight, because nobody ever looks there.
Jerusalem and Israel, rather than Rome and the Vatican. As Napoleon Bonaparte moved through the Middle East in 1799, he fully intended to make this happen. A 2004 piece in Haaretz admitted, in the summer of 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte conquered Egypt, and in the summer of the same year, he led 30,000 soldiers through the Sinai Peninsula into the land of Israel. On March 7, 1799, Napoleon took control of Jaffa, and then headed north to the besieged Acre. Napoleon intends, quote, to restore to the Jews their Jerusalem, end quote, read a French report at the time.
And also, one small little sign that it's not getting out much is that it seems that Israel is suffering more damage than they're letting out. And so why would they allow this to happen? Why would they destroy all the stuff that's already there unless they are ready to totally do something else there?
While another report claimed that, quote, Bonaparte published a proclamation that calls on all the Jews of Africa and Asia to rally around his flag in order to reestablish ancient Jerusalem. Napoleon was a high Freemason, guided by the Jesuits through their agents like Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès, a Jesuit-trained Catholic priest and close confidant of the dictator. Although it did not occur in 1799, it remained a high priority for the Vatican and her Freemasonic foot soldiers, as was evidenced by a letter written 80 years later from Confederate Army General Albert Pike, a high Freemason and the founder of the Ku Klux Klan, the purpose of which was to exploit racial hatred to keep populations divided and easy to control. To high Italian Freemason Giuseppe Mazzini,
So here is the intersection with the city of London. It falls right in here. So we looked at the last video before power got cut off. The gate, the Temple Bar in Paternoster Square there in the city of London. Paternoster, you know, like the prayer in the Catholic Church. Well, they look the same as the Church of the Jesu, which is in Rome. And right across the street there is the Scottish Rite Freemason headquarters, where these two guys are. So these are all the same operation. These are identical operations. They could just use new names. This guy can be here, this guy could be here. And you have your little puppets. And the puppets are Gog and Magog. And that's why they wheel them out there in their little parade. They are the puppets. You know, somebody has to play them as a role, basically, is what I gather from it. These will be the two sock puppets.
The 1871 letter supposedly predicts the first two world wars and a third world war between Muslims and, quote, Zionists. Although Napoleon Bonaparte was unsuccessful in resurrecting the nation of Israel, he was able to help create the banking family that would eventually see it through. As a result of insider trading based upon Napoleon's loss at Waterloo, great wealth was handed to the family of Rothschild, named after the red shields the Romans used in battle. Does that sound like a stretch? It was further confirmed by the name of the family that was first incorporated, Meyer Amschel Rothschild and Son, a contorted acronym for Mars, the Roman god of war. As the Encyclopedia Judaica states, the Rothschilds are simply the keepers of the Vatican treasury. As we've already shown you, World War II, the Third Reich, and the Holocaust were all birthed by Rome and the Jesuits as an integral part of this agenda. The horrors of Adolf Hitler, a Vatican puppet created by the Jesuits, as was shown by the ghost writer of Mein Kampf, a Jesuit priest named Bernard Stampfel, along with henchmen and monsters like Heinrich Himmler, a Jesuit seminarian.
Also, the whole writing, the book there, the whole Jesuit assistant that Charles Darwin had, it's all connected because that whole book is based on Darwinism. And that's why it's a trap, there's this movement that because the Israel issue and what's going on there in this Jewish thing, they basically believe that because that's the case now, everything Hitler did was okay. I don't know where that comes from. I don't understand. I don't have any issue with the idea that history was probably manipulated. No, yeah, that's probably true. I don't have any issue with stories being manipulated, created, falsified. That's true. But these people are still puppets all the same. And they play both sides. And so he had a banker. Who is the banker? They don't ask that question.
Jews were forced to find a place where they would not be persecuted. When it appeared that there would not be a population large enough to reconstitute the nation-state of Israel, Jewish proselytes of dubious ancestry, such as the Khazars in southern Russia, were encouraged to join them. To this very day, duped Christians believe that it is important to donate money to help relocate Russian Jews to Israel. Sadly, many Jews are oblivious to this manipulation by the Vatican. One, however, was not. Canadian-born Israeli citizen.
Yeah, this guy's interesting. I was going to say, the truth is that I really am happy to see when the little bit of, because you see they don't ever let it get out to the press too much, but there's quite a lot of pushback between Jewish people who are not interested in what Israel's doing. They don't want to be associated with it. And unfortunately, the people who are basically being used to fuel the whole operation are those are the ones who are going to get all the bad pushback. because they want to conflate the issue, and they push this so hard. It's really like messed up. And that's how you understand that they are kind of guilty of something. Because if they weren't, they would not need to confuse the country of Israel with the Jewish people. It's two different things, but they play with words, and they do it so well. There's obvious malicious intent in how well they manipulate the dialectic that way. Because you can't deliberately confuse the two unless you want people who didn't have any part in it to get hurt. And they're okay with that, because then they can crack down on everybody's rights. And that's what they're getting ready to do.
And author Barry Shamish frequently wrote and spoke about Rome's manipulations in the Middle East. In January of 2001, Barry recounted how 7 years previously, in 1994, the newspaper Shadashot revealed a most remarkable secret of the Middle East peace process. A friend of Shimon Peres, the French intellectual Marek Halter, claimed in an interview that in May of 93, he delivered a letter from Peres to the Pope. Within, Peres promised to internationalize Jerusalem, granting the United Nations political control of the Old City, and the Vatican would be given hegemony over the holy sites within. Halter's claim was further backed by the Italian newspaper La Stampa, which added that Arafat was appraised of the agreement and was included in the secret clauses of the Declaration of Principles signed in Washington, D.C. in September of 1993. Barry continued, Peres's partner in crime and the real founder of the Oslo Accord, Yossi Beilin, coordinated his PLO policy with the Vatican. Beilin's deal with the Pope became another brief scandal when politicians like Agudat Yisrael head Avram Shapira and Jerusalem Deputy Mayor Shmuel Meir leaked hidden details of Beilin's accord, which included, quote, the extraterritoriality of holy sites in Jerusalem are going to be transferred to Vatican control, end quote. Later, Shapira was neutralized by having $250 million in debt accrued by his crooked carpet factory forgiven, while Meir was permanently hushed when his car was crushed by a UN truck driver who was briefly questioned by Israeli police. In 2001, the foreign minister of Israel, Shlomo Ben Ami, mysteriously shuttled between King Carlos of Spain and the Vatican. Shamish mentions that this is also a high priority for the Council on Foreign Relations, the real power of which, he states, is the Society of Jesus. Shamish, again a Jewish Israeli citizen, acknowledged that the Jesuits were a reaction to the Protestant Reformation, and their agenda was, quote, to return the planet to the good old days when one pope held monopoly on all world religions. Utilizing any evil means available, their plan is to eliminate all competition, be they Jew, Muslim, or Christian, who don't recognize the Vatican as their capital, end quote. Barry then added, it is their war on the Jews which will most interest my readers. It was the Jesuit control of Great Britain which was the real force behind Zionism and the reestablishment of a Jewish homeland in Israel. Just as Britain created Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Iraq, and Lebanon, Shamish reinforced the understanding that the Holocaust was designed by the Jesuits to herd Jews towards Jerusalem. Barry cites Walter Schellenberg, chief of the Nazi Sicherheitsdienst, revealed how the SS was organized by Himmler according to the principles of the Jesuit order. The rules of service and spiritual exercises prescribed by Ignatius de Loyola constituted a model which Hitler strove carefully to copy.
And that's absolutely the case, because we've got the admissions to that in writing.
Zionist Israel is the creation of the Jesuit order. Its purpose is to secure Jerusalem for the Jesuits and their, quote, infallible pope, that he may receive worldwide worship from Solomon's rebuilt temple. Masonic Zionists betrayed their own Jewish race into the hands of Pope Pius XII and the concentration camps overseen by the Jesuit order. Shamish goes on, we are living under the preeminence of a Gentile Jesuit conspiracy. It employs notorious Masonic Jews and Gentiles as their agents. As deception, they use the subterfuge of an international Jewish conspiracy which oppresses the nations. With this lie, the Jesuit Superior General is restoking the flames of hatred against the Jews. It will culminate in the destruction of Jewish-owned Israel to finally be handed over to the Vatican. This is the ultimate and terrible design of this plan.
And so that gives you quite a bit of background there. Let's see what I want to... let's see. Yeah, so we touched on last night before we got cut off. We touched on the bar. I said how the bar, you can't get, permission to use the term bar unless you get permission from the people who own the original bar. And so a number of the signers of the Declaration of Independence held the title, or I guess you could call it a suffix, or at the end of the name, of Esquire, which is a British, I've got the definition here, Esquire, which means a shield of sorts, a shield bearer or an armor bearer, a suitor, an attendant on a knight, hence in modern times, a title of dignity next in degree below a knight. In England, the title is given to the younger sons of noblemen, to officers of the king's court and of the household, to counselors at law, justices of the peace, while in commission, sheriffs or other gentlemen. In the United States, the title is given to public officers of all degrees, from governors down to justices and attorneys. And so that is a British term, and that's why a number of the Benjamin Franklin was one. Let's see if I've got the names here somewhere. There's some other terms there. We might go through them again. There are 4 inns. I think it had that here too, an inn. An inn. An inn in England, a college of municipal or common law professors and students. Here, one second. Let me make the screen look better. An inn in England, a college of municipal or common law professors and students, formerly the townhouse of a nobleman, such as the Knights Templar, bishop, or other distinguished personage in which he resided when he attended the court. Inns of court, colleges in which students of law reside and are instructed. The principal are the Inner Temple, the Middle Temple, Lincoln's Inn, and Gray's Inn. Inns of chancery, colleges in which young students formerly begin their law studies. These are now occupied chiefly by attorneys, solicitors, etc. From here, the history of the inn, later centuries, the citation, written by the Honorable Society of the Middle Temple, we can see a direct tie to the Bar Association franchises and its crown signatories in America. It says, quote, call to the bar or keeping terms in one of the 4 inns, a prerequisite to call at the King's Inns until late in the 19th century. In the 17th and 18th centuries, students came from the American colonies and from many of the West Indian islands. The inn's records would lead one to suppose that for a time there was hardly a young gentleman in Charleston who had not studied here. 5 of the signatories to the Declaration of Independence were Middle Templars, and notwithstanding it and its consequences, Americans continued to come here until the War of 1812, so it says. All bar licensed attorneys must keep the terms of their oath to the Crown Temple in order to be accredited or called to bar at any of the King's Inns. Their oath, pledge, and terms of allegiance are made to the Crown Temple. It's a real eye-opener to know that the Middle Inn of the Crown Temple has publicly acknowledged there were at least 5 Templar bar attorneys under solemn oath only to the crown who signed what was alleged to be an American Declaration of Independence. This simply means that both parties to the Declaration Agreement were of the same origin, the Crown Temple. In case you don't understand the importance of this, there is no international agreement or treaty that will ever be honored or will ever have been lawful effect when the same party signs as both the first and second parties, basically saying you can't, sign both sides of the contract and it be valid. It's merely a worthless piece of paper with no lawful authority when both sides to any agreement are actually the same. In reality, the American Declaration of Independence was nothing more than an internal memo of the Crown Temple made among its private members. By example, Alexander Hamilton was one of those numerous Crown Templars who was called to their bar. In 1774, he entered the King's College in New York City, which was funded by members of the London King's Inn, now named Columbia University. And we had mentioned that in the video I did the other day on Dumbing America Down. That's as old as I am. The book came out in 1999. In 1777, he became a personal aide and private secretary to George Washington during the American Revolution. And while he was the president, the first president, he was one of the top advisors. Yeah, exactly. Big wigs because they wore wigs on their heads. That's exactly why. And it was just something to do with, I guess, making it look large. It was just, you want to look tall or large. I mean, I don't know with that. It just shows how petty they are. Because if that's really all you've got to stand on. In May of 1782, Alexander Hamilton began studying law in Albany, New York, and within 6 months had completed a 3-year course of studies, passed his examinations, and was admitted to the New York Bar. Of course, the New York Bar Association was/is a franchise of the Crown Temple through the Middle Inn. After a year's service in Congress, during the 1782-83 session, he settled down to a legal practice in New York City as Alexander Hamilton, Esquire. In February of 1784, he wrote the charter for and became a founding member of the Bank of New York, the state's first bank. He secured a place on the New York delegation to the Federal Convention of 1787 at Philadelphia. In a 5-hour speech on June 18th, he stated, "An executive for life will be an elective monarch." In a 5-hour speech on June 18th, Hamilton stated that an executive for life will be an elective monarch. When all his anti-federalist New York colleagues withdrew from the convention in protest, he alone signed the Constitution for the United States of America, representing the New York State, one of the legal crown states or crown colonies. New York was, because it's the Empire State. One should particularly notice that a lawful state is made up of the people, but a state is a legal entity of the crown, a crown colony. I'll say that again. One should particularly notice that a lawful state is made up of the people, but a state is a legal entity of the crown, a crown colony. This is an example of the deceptive ways the Crown Temple and Middle Templars have taken control of America since the beginning of our settlements. Later, as President Washington's U.S. Treasury Secretary, Hamilton alone laid the foundation of the first federal U.S. central bank, secured credit loans through the crown banks in France and the Netherlands, and increased the power of the federal government over the hoodwinked nation-states of the Union. Hamilton had never made a secret of the fact that he admired the government and fiscal policies of Great Britain. Americans were fooled into believing that the legal crown colonies comprising New England were independent nation-states, but they never were nor are today. They were and still are colonies of the Crown Temple through letters patent and charters who have no legal authority to be independent from the rule and order of the Crown Temple. A legal state is a Crown Temple colony. So what's being said there is that because all of the 13 original colonies were created by a royal charter, and that royal charter having, roughly to say, having to be backed by the Bank of England at that time, the Bank of Great Britain, basically they were not they were not states of their own standing. They were created and were guaranteed by the bank. And so, yeah, that's true. They were and still are colonies of the Crown Temple through letters, patent, and charters, which are, but they're slightly different, but a letters, patent, and a charter is similar enough. And that's why you have a major difference between the Constitution for the United States of America and the Constitution of the United States of America. Because a Constitution of is a charter. Neither the American people nor the Queen of Britain, who's now dead or stuck in purgatory, because there's a news clip where they said she's stuck and the death is irreversible, so who knows. Neither the American people nor the Queen of Britain own America. The Crown Temple owns America through the deception of these who have sworn their allegiance by oath to the Middle Templar bar. The Crown bankers and their Middle Templar attorneys rule America through unlawful contracts, unlawful taxes, and contract documents of false equity through the debt deceit, all strictly enforced by their completely unlawful but quote-unquote legal orders. Rules and codes of the Crown Templar courts, our so-called judiciary criminal system. This is because the Crown Temple holds the land titles and estate deeds to North America, and that's true. The reason that is true is because our federal loans, that we just have infinite amount of interest that we owe on them. Well, those are collateral, is our land. All of the federal land is the collateral for our national debt. You think Thomas Massey's in Congress with his little debt thing that he wears around and it just continues to go up? That's because the change, I guess you could say, are the land. Now this is we're talking about the city of London. It's inside of London. It's not London, it's the city of London. It has a bunch of special qualities. It's connected to the Catholic Jesuits. It's a major financial center. They have banks and central planning and a lot of livery companies. It's kind of an epicenter for the mafia and the church and the state to come together. And you have the Vatican, you have Washington, D.C. They're all special territories. They are not, for instance, Washington, D.C. is not a state. It has special qualities. The Washington, D.C. is technically, it's a company, it's a corporation. A constitution of the United States, which was the D.C. Organic Act. I think it was 1871. It might have been 76. Okay, let's see. Mandates, disguised protocols, or white papers, are mandates disguised, documented as official procedure. Juxtaposition 1 defines it as an illicit conspiracy formulated in secret by figures adhering to Swiss bank directives. We will talk about the Swiss shortly. I'll squeeze that in because that's basically the Pope has the Swiss Guard who follow him and quote-unquote protect him. The Swiss were set up to basically be a bank that has an army. The best way to remember it is that, a bank that has an army. So protocols, illicit conspiracy formulated in secret by figures adhering to Swiss bank directives, aimed at legitimizing illegal actions without public transparency or debate. mandates, ultimatums, unfriendly commands issued by higher authorities, deceptively justified under the guise of established protocol. Ultimatums, an aggressive, unfriendly command issued by a pompous higher authority, often threatening consequences such as "or else" if obedience is not immediately rendered. Can you guys guess who the higher authority is? You guessed it, there's the higher authority right there. A term for those holding superior compulsory authority, wielding the power to issue orders and enforce obedience through the terrifying concept of "or else." The ultimate seat of higher authority today is the Swiss bank apparatus located in Geneva, Switzerland. Now, you might ask, why is that the case? Well, because you basically need some banking fortress. You need a bank that is a fortress. And so to pull that off in the city of London, you could try to use the Tower of London, and they did for a while, but it's not really sufficient to handle the globe and everything going on there. So for instance, in Switzerland, they have banned Palantir. Can you believe that? Switzerland is not having Palantir in the country. They've completely banned it. Also, the Bank for International Settlements in Switzerland, even the head of the Switzerland, the president or whatever of Switzerland, is not allowed to enter the bank without permission from the manager. So the bank does run Switzerland, because if you're the president of the country and you can't go into the bank, that means the bank is in charge, not you. So let's see, is there anything else? Okay, I think I will go ahead and bounce. Let's make sure. 1776, we'll get through this really quickly. 1776 is the year that will truly live in infamy for all Americans. It is the year that the Crown Colonies became legal Crown states. The Declaration of Independence was a legal, not lawful document. It was signed on both sides by representatives of the Crown Temple. Legally, it announced the status quo of the Crown Colonies to that of the new legal name called states, as direct possessive estates of the Crown. See the definitions above to understand. Let's see. Status quo and states is what I need to look for. A colony is a company, a legal corporation or body of people transplanted from their mother country to a remote province or country to cultivate it and inhabit it, remaining subject to the jurisdiction of the parent state, as the British colonies in America or the Indies, the Spanish colonies in South America. State, to stand or be fixed, condition, the circumstances of a being or thing at any given time. These circumstances may be internal, constitutional, or peculiar to the being, or they may have relation to other beings. For estate, possession. And then we go to the definition for estate and possession. Estate, the roots have been nearly the same signification: to set, to fix. It is probable that I'm not sure that it is contracted from its etymology. I'm not. Probably Latin, stati. In a general sense, fixedness, a fixed condition, fortune, possessions, property in general, the general business or interest of government, hence a political body, a commonwealth, a republic, but in this sense we now use state. He's saying in Webster's 1828 dictionary, a state and state were kind of the same thing, but today we call it states. A patent, appropriated by letters patent, apparent, conspicuous, a writing given by the proper authority and duly authenticated, granting a privilege to some person or persons by patent or letters patent. That is, open letters of the King of Great Britain grants lands, honors, or franchises. Let's see, lawful, in accordance with the law of the land, according to the law, permitted, sanctioned, or justified by law. Legal, pertaining to the understanding, the exposition, the administration, the science, and the practice of law as a legal profession, legal advice, legal blanks, implied or imputed in law, opposed to actual. Legal looks more to the letter and lawful to the spirit. Legal is more appropriate for conformity to positive rules of law, lawful for accord with ethical principle. Legal imports rather that the forms of law are observed, that the proceeding is correct in method, that rules prescribed have been obeyed. Lawful, that the right is actful in substance, that moral quality is structured. Legal is the antithesis of equitable and the equivalent of constructive. So they play with words. They're really good at that. Status in quo, or status quo, the state in which. So here's a little legal trickery. Status quo means the state in which anything is already. The phrase is also used retrospectively as when on a treaty of place. Matters return to the status quo antebellum or are left in status quo, the state it was before the war. So this was a bit of legal trickery that was used. Let's go down and continue. It was signed, the declaration was signed on both sides by representatives of the Crown Temple. Legally, it announced the status quo, meaning the state in which it was of the Crown colonies, to that of the new legal name called states. So it said the state in which these colonies are states. It takes a special person's mind to follow along with this. I understand it's kind of word salad, but status quo, and this, as I just read a minute ago, said that this is used in treaties. They say that things will go back to the way that they were in a treaty, status quo. So in the Declaration of Independence, it uses the term status quo, and it says the state that we are going to convey upon, the states, the colonies, is states. We're going to call them states. So the status quo, the state in which something, the colonies now were, are states. American people were hoodwinked into thinking that they were declaring lawful independence from the crown. Proof that the colonies are still in crown possession is the use of the word state to signify a legal estate of possession. Had this been a document of and by the people, both the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution would have been written using the word states. By the use of state, that's the plural, I'll say that again. Had the U.S. Constitution been written by the people, it would have been written plural, states. These are the United States, multiple different states. By the use of state, singular, the significance of a government of estate possession was legally established. All of the North American states are Crown Templar possessions through their legal documents signed by their representation of both parties to the contract, known as the Constitution of the United States of America. All constitutional rights in America are simply those dictated by the Crown Temple and enforced by the middle-in Templars, the bar attorneys, through their franchise and corporate government entity, the federal United States government. When a, quote, state citizen attempts to invoke his constitutional, natural, or common law rights in chancery, called equity courts, he is told that they don't apply. Why is that? Simply because a state citizen has no rights outside of the rule and codes of crown law. A state citizen has natural and common law rights by the paramount authority of God's law. The people who comprise the citizenry of a state are recognized only within natural and common law, as is already established by God's law. Only a state citizen can be a party to an action within a state court. A common state citizen cannot be recognized in that court because he doesn't legally exist in the Crown Chancery Courts. In order to be recognized in their state courts, the common man must be converted to that of a corporate or legal entity, a legal fiction. And so that kind of goes down the whole idea of the birth certificate system, which is kind of beyond what I'm going to touch on today. So let me pivot back over here, and I'm going to finish us out with a couple more bits of information. Let's see. Yeah, so Switzerland is what I wanted to connect to. Let's see. Switzerland, the neutral area. So the only country that's ever been neutral in the history of mankind, which should tell you everything you need to know. To protect the immense wealth generated by the city of London, and to ensure that wars engineered by the elite did not destroy their own assets, a neutral safe haven was required. And so at the Congress of Vienna in 1815, around the same time as the Holy Alliance, the global oligarchy deliberately designed or designated Switzerland as a bank with an army attached. The neutrality of Switzerland was guaranteed by the major powers, ensuring that it would serve as an untouchable repository where the ill-gotten gains of global revolutions and wars could be safely deposited without fear of being repossessed. The BIS, the Bank for International Settlements, with the City of London controlling the wealth and Switzerland providing the impenetrable vault, the elite constructed the ultimate control mechanism, the Bank for International Settlements. The banker's fortress, founded in 1930, ostensibly to handle German reparations from World War I, which was from the Treaty of Versailles. This was organized by the treaty, actually was drafted by the Dulles brothers. You know, Alan Dulles, the guy who Kennedy fired as CIA director. They had wrote or drafted, I guess you could say drafted, I won't say like completely wrote, but they played a role in drafting the Treaty of Versailles, along with Montague Norman, who was governor of the Bank of England and part of the City of London, and Himmler Schacht, president of the German Reich Bank. Its true purpose was to establish an apex institution, a bank for central banks. Oh, not a problem, buddy. Yeah, a bank with an army. Bet that they make great knives. Yeah, I bet they do too. They don't see the bank with an army. It's interesting because you've got the Swiss Guard in the Vatican. You know, they're just there to keep the Pope safe. That's what they think. But they've been there for 500 years. So maybe instead they're keeping him in. Maybe they're not keeping anybody out. Absolute immunity. Through the Hague Convention of 1930, the BIS was granted unprecedented legal privileges. It is completely immune from expropriation, seizure, censorship, and the jurisdiction of any national government, including Switzerland. Its archives are inviolable. Its staff includes diplomatic immunity, and it pays no taxes, financing the Nazi war machine because the BIS operates above all laws and morality. It functioned as a de facto arm of the Nazi Reich Bank during World War II. While American and British soldiers died on the battlefield, the American president of the BIS, Thomas McKittrick, sat in Basel alongside the Nazi French and Italian bankers. Yeah, so they basically were set up to be a safe haven for the moving of assets, to move assets around and make sure that they couldn't take the gold from them. And so they had to have an army at the bank. And that's what I meant earlier is you can't have a banking empire without some way to protect physical assets, even though you have digital money now and you have fiat currency. They still care about gold, and they're stockpiling quite a bit of it, and they've been kind of sucking up all of the gold for a long time. So let's see. Yeah, oh, and the Dulles brothers lived in Switzerland. Not Alan Dulles, I think, did. Maybe in his older life. They had a... there was Alan Dulles, and he had his brother, who was Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles. And John Dulles had a son who was a Catholic, Roman Catholic Jesuit cardinal. And so they are a Catholic family. Absolutely. And they were just chilled out in Switzerland. So it's a pretty nice place to be. They don't have Palantir. They don't have anything like that. The BIS remains the supreme dictator of the global economy through its bi-monthly, highly secretive meetings in the Tower of Basel. The central bankers of the world, including the Federal Reserve of Washington, D.C., and the Bank of England of the City of London. They act in concert to manipulate global credit, engineer economic booms and busts, and strip nations of their sovereignty. Essentially, they're different valves. You could say valves. Or faucet. You have a faucet and you turn it and more water comes out and less water comes out. It's the same idea. You need to have a few different central banks, and you need to be able to control a few of them and have them come and settle internationally, meaning to swap all of their currencies, do whatever they got to do. That's what goes down in Switzerland. And you don't ever hear about Switzerland much. It feels you don't hear it. Yeah, I mean... I don't know. It's if you don't have something to talk about with the show, then either go watch something else, that's fine, and wait until James is back, or whatever. Yeah, there's no gold on Fort Knox. Remember how quick that they brought that up and then they forgot about that? They said, oh, we're going to audit Fort Knox. We're going to audit Fort Knox. We said that for 3 days, and then nobody ever heard anything about it. It's been kind of a hush-hush issue, but it does seem like people were starting to become aware that this happened back in like the 70s. There were reporters talking about it. There were supposedly people dying over the story getting out. So that was cleared out a long time ago. And let's see, let's finish off here. I talk a little bit about the Treaty of Verona. The Treaty of Verona, I'm going to just read, just these 2 sections. So the Treaty of Verona and the Holy Alliance, which brings us to the Monroe Doctrine. To understand the ideological origin of the money trust, which there was in 1912, the Pujo Committee from 1912 to 1913 examined the concentration of control over money and credit, targeting the operations of major New York financial institutions, a clearinghouse association, and the New York Stock Exchange, including interlocking directorates and stock manipulations that enabled a small group of bankers to dominate national economic resources. So that's what the Pujo Committee was. And so basically what I'm trying to make the point of here. There was an investigation by Congress in 1912 that said, hey, all these bankers have got control over, they've monopolized the whole government. And this is what was used as justification to create the Federal Reserve Act. They used this to create the Federal Reserve Act because the money system was controlled by bankers. So this has happened already. All of this that's going on right now, and people find out that the money system's controlled, has happened before. Charles Lindbergh Sr. had given some speeches, and I will show you those before we clean up. The secret Treaty of Verona, signed on November 22nd, 1822. Document was forged by the Holy Alliance, which was Austria, France, Prussia, and Russia, under the influence of Metternich. It is the absolute, unvarnished declaration of war by the ruling elite against the very concept of human freedom and self-determination. The treaty's brutal revelations include... Yes, absolutely. That's absolutely what it was. Because he had written some publications on it, and maybe that's a topic for another time, but that did kind of go into this right here. So the treaty, absolutely, he was the one that I think gave it the name Money Trust. That was what he called it in his book. And he was probably part of that committee because he was in Congress at the time. Let's see. The Treaty of Verona in 1822 wanted an annihilation of representative government. Article 1 of the treaty explicitly states that the system of representative government is equally as incompatible with the monarchical principles as the maxim of sovereignty of the people with the high divine right. The powers engaged in the most solemn manner to use all their efforts to put an end to the system of representative government globally. Suppression of the press. Article 2 identified the liberty of the press as the most powerful weapon of the people and bound the contracting parties to adopt all proper measures to suppress it. Weaponization of religion. Article 3 confirmed the elite strategy to use religion to keep nations in the state of passive obedience, which they owe to their princes, thanking the Pope for his cooperation in submitting the nations. The conspiracy to destroy popular government and reestablish monarchical tyranny by force, specifically targeting the newly independent American republics, was the catalyst, the direct catalyst for the Monroe Doctrine. So you know how Trump is bringing that back up. He's talking about the Monroe Doctrine. So that's for a reason. To bring that up, to make that connection. I'm not necessarily sure what it means, but this pops up when it has to do with the European royalty saying we're not interested in freedom. Their idea was this, simple. Either the monarchs destroy freedom, or freedom destroys the monarchs. And this was the kind of the origin of this great competition. And so, yeah, this is a video that I did on my channel. You'll have to check out on the war at the southern border, because they tried to use Mexico during the Civil War. That's why, as we watched earlier, I said that probably, I can't remember who he said supported the Confederacy, and I said because the Confederacy was supported by the Vatican. But when the Holy Alliance of 1822 used invading armies and papal influence to crush constitutional republics in Spain and Italy, the modern Money Trust utilizes a weapon far more insidious and effective: fiat currency, central banking, and unpayable debt. The Money Trust achieves the goals of the Treaty of Verona without firing a single shot. By controlling the issuance of money through the Federal Reserve, which is a private banking cartel inextricably linked to the Bank of England, the elite effectively bypass representative government, stripping the masses of their property, labor, and political voice. As clearly articulated in 1862, the European plan was to replace physical subjugation with financial subjugation, capital controlling labor. By centralizing wealth into the hands of a few men sitting in Wall Street and the City of London, the Money Trust has established an invisible monarchy. They dictate public policy, fund the press to suppress faith, mirroring Article 2 of the Verona Treaty, and keep the populace in a state of passive obedience through wage slavery and economic terror. Oh yeah, they are. A lot of people are seeing through it. But again, if you are in the UK, you can be arrested if you offend somebody. So yeah, these are all majorly connected. Let's see, where was the images? I have an image here somewhere. Yeah, the quote's from Lindbergh in 1941 from Charles Lindbergh in his Des Moines, Iowa speech. September 11th, 1941. It is now 2 years since the latest European war begins. From the day in September 1939 until the present moment, there has been an ever-increasing effort to force the United States into the conflict. That effort has been carried on by foreign interests and by a small minority of our own people. But it has been so successful that today our country stands on the verge of war. That effort has been carried on by foreign interests and by a small minority of our own people. But it has been so successful that today our country stands on the verge of war. When this war started in Europe, it was clear that the American people were solidly opposed to entering it. Why wouldn't we be? We had the best defensive position in the world. We had a tradition of independence from Europe, and the one time we did take a part in a European war left European problems unsolved and debts to America unpaid. It is obvious and perfectly understandable that Great Britain wants the United States in the war on her side. England is now in a desperate position. Her population is not large enough and her armies are not strong enough to invade the continent of Europe and win the war. She declared against Germany, if England can draw this country into the war, she can shift to our shoulders a large portion of the responsibility for waging it and for paying its cost. The Roosevelt administration has been carrying this country toward war. They have used the war to add unlimited billions to a debt, which is already the highest we've ever known. Man, what is that? 1941. Let's see, carrying the country toward war. They have used the war to add unlimited billions to a debt which was already the highest we've ever known. And they have just used the war to justify the restriction of congressional power and the assumption of dictatorial procedures on the part of the president and his appointees. We are on the verge of war, but it is not yet too late to stay out. It is not too late to show that no amount of money or propaganda or patronage can force a free and independent people into war against its will. It is not yet too late to retrieve and to maintain the independent American destiny that our forefathers established in this new world. And it's eerie because it's the same thing going on right now. Same story. 1941. Some pictures one more time. That's in the city of London. And this is right here in Rome, across the street from the Freemasons, right here. And my last note before I finish and wrap this up. Britannia, the evolution of the Sea Queen. I didn't get into this as much as I wanted to, but maybe I'll cover this probably tomorrow. If I'm, tomorrow will be my last night, I think. So, the Sea Queen, Britannia, the Sun Cross, these are interesting connections to the mermaids, if you remember. The golden stagecoach there has got the two mermaids carrying the fasci with a trident, which is a unique symbol. Yep, it's the same thing. That's true. Right there, buddy. Roosevelt said he would not send our boys to war, just like Wilson and now Trump. They've done this before. He's absolutely right. I'm glad that you mentioned that. Thank you for mentioning that. That's true, because I remember, I think it was like, there's somebody giving an interview that I had listened to, but it said that, and it was the same thing. He had promised he had won the war and promised to not get people in, and here it is. And so why are there mermaids with the special symbol that we've not ever seen anywhere else, the fasci with the trident? Well, it's because Britannia is this sea queen, a goddess, which is Phoenician. Yeah, while the Sun Cross represents the male aspects of divine protection, a female force or figure was emerged to protect the waves. Britannia. Evidence from Phoenician coinage reveals that modern Britannia is the ancient Phoenician tutelary goddess Baradi, known as Egypt as the mother of the waters. Key features of Baradi and Britannia connection: marine protectress. As the Lady of the Waters, Baradi was the patroness of the winged galleys for a seafaring nation. Maritime laws is the idea here. The figure represents the primary benefit of maritime supremacy and the protection of global trade. The shield with sun crosses. Baradi is frequently depicted seated with a shield featuring the sun cross, the direct prototype of the Union Jack shield held by Britannia today, and the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, represents the industrial and agricultural prosperity of the Aryan Phoenicians brought to their colonies, signifying the material wealth that forms the backbone of an empire. So I did want to mention that because that was the connection here. Britannia is the ruler of the sea, the currency, maritime law, and banking. That's what it's about. And it also, in a very plain sense, means kind of the king of hell, because the sea was the realm of the dead. It was the... you guys probably have seen the Pirates of the Caribbean. You know, there's the Davy Jones has got the ship, and they're all ghosts. Well, it's because the sea was the realm of the dead. It was like hell before we got the fire and brimstones. It used to be to the ancient peoples, it was the sea. Because you don't know, it's dark down there and the water's cold, and you don't want to know how far down it goes, and so it was scary. That's where they thought, the realm of the dead was. And that's why also, with the millstone about the neck, because you get sink to the bottom of the sea and you can go into be with the demons. So that's what this claim is, to lay claim to not Roman fasci, but through money, to rule through money. And that's what you get to at the end of the 3 city-states. They all have a different attempt to rule in different ways. So the Catholic, that's why I make these, because I know some people have a better time looking at it than hearing somebody say it. But in terms of a nuclear society, the same principle is the father, which would be the active role, the state, fear. Mother church is superstition. And then the spirit through ignorance, propaganda now. So those are the trident. I guess the trident symbol is that. And remember, we go back to the Aquarian conspiracy. You've got the triskelion symbol. So 3 pops up quite a bit in this, and I think it has to do with the 3 city-states, these 3 nexus of power. Everybody else said no taxes, no new taxes. That's true. They all lie. How can people not learn from history? Well, because they don't read anymore. And that's why I wanted also to do that video the other night. Now the kids are just not learning how to read. And so that's why. Because if you have people who don't read books, who are not interested in learning this stuff that we go over here, well, then they don't learn history, and they're going to repeat it. Oh, I mean, the Catholic Church is having a revival right now, because they are coming out now as anti-Zionist, and that's exactly what they wanted to be. They wanted to be there to get all of the people to be anti-Jew, and then from that point, then everybody they will feel welcome at home at the Catholic Church, because they're now anti-Zionist, or speaking out against it. Now, because they've got this huge platform, and they didn't want to speak out about it until after everything started in Iran. But guys, I think that is going to wrap up tonight's show. I think that was a good show. I know that I went over and did a lot of reading, covered a lot, but it's a pretty big topic. And I guess to a point, I'm kind of glad that I got to do a second follow-up show, because it's kind of a 2-part. Yes, exactly. They play all sides at every time, and that's the whole idea of kayfabe. Here, I'll put that one up. Kayfabe is you got to have 2 people on the sides of the wrestling ring, or you don't have a wrestling show. force and make believe. It's the idea that you make a fight that seems believable because it captivates, it fascinates people. And you remember the, fascination. It's the same root. It absolutely is the same root, to fascinate or to bundle stuff together. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Argurdison. Thank you, Boots. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate everybody tuning in. And I'm going to wrap it up here, and I will be back with you tomorrow night, and then I do believe James will be back on Wednesday. So, guys, I always enjoy being your guest host. I'm glad that you guys have been so kind and welcoming to me over the year that I've done this now. You guys have been great. You guys are here every night, and so far however many of you have seen me and been fine with it, to the one detractor, and everybody's got to have one and have it the first time, so I welcome it. I would just, honestly, to a degree, I know this, people probably won't believe me when I say this, but I kind of would like somebody to actually give me some fair argument. Like, I would actually like to do that, because usually I'll learn something from it. Somebody comes and they say, hey, I disagree with this, or this is, maybe I don't think you were right on that, and they actually tell me why. That's great. I can learn something from it. But I'm kind of, it's sad because it's like half the time that I spend the energy thinking about it, and it's like, it's not even, I don't even learn something from it, because it's not, doesn't do anything for me. But guys, I appreciate each and every one of you. I will see you in the next one. Take care.